Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, friends in the globe. This is Roger Tripathi from Global BioAg Linkages Global BioAg Alliance. Most of you know me, so I won't waste too much time introducing myself. Just to give a little snapshot about me that after being in the corporate life for so long, I decided that I want to do something where I'm still running it as a business, but as a break-even model where I can add through my team some legacy, add some value to the day-to-day life of the farmers and our stakeholders. And without you, we could not have been here. It's almost going to be 10th year next year. So thank you so much for all your support. This podcast, the registrations itself shows to us how much support you're giving us. So thank you so much. With regards to this podcast, I want to give you a little introduction. This podcast was the idea of the regulatory forum of the Global BioAg Alliance, led by Jose, and Daniela is the ambassador of that. And they said that we need to start the dialogue where we can start sharing our views globally, which is not the case most of the time. We are talking in silos. We talk at some forums in different events, but there's no really ongoing dialogue. And that's the reason why we are starting this series. And hopefully, with your input, we can keep improving. On that, let me introduce my two guests today. In fact, I'm the guest, they are the host in reality, because it's their forum. They are leading it. I'm just facilitating it. And Daniela, you are from Stafford, Brazil. You are leading the whole business unit in Latin America, and you are the regulatory expert, what I understand. But when you start talking, it will be good if you can give a little more of what you are doing so people can understand the background. And Jose, I think most of the people might know you as well because you have been in the tracks for a long time with different hats. I'm not going to count all your hats, but for sure, the current one with IBMA, I would say will be the most relevant for this discussion, other than that you are leading also the BioFirst and some of the group companies regulatory. On that note, let me ask a common question to both of you. Of course, knowing Jose's gentleman approach, he's going to say ladies first. So Daniela, it may go to you. And I'm going to be very honest and provocative as always. That's why they call me Dutch Indian. In the regulatory landscape, if we talk very candidly, are we really moving forward? Are we making any progress? Are we feeling that, yes, finally, we are all on the same page? Or you think we are going in circles? What do you think, Daniela?
Thank you, Roger. Thank you for the invitation and the presentation. Just a brief introduction. I am Daniela Maia. I am biologist, and I have been working with regulatory affairs since 2009 here in Brazil, and always focus on the biological products. So I had the opportunity to see the big increase in the biological segments here in Brazil, and talk about the regulation. I believe that Brazil has been making great strides on the regulation. We had the first specific regulation for biological more than 20 years ago. And more recently, we have the new law for the bioinputs. We still have some steps until having a very good regulation, but I think we are in a very good transition phase. We've moved the past the stage of having to prove that biologicals work here in Brazil. If we go back about 10, 15 years ago, the big question was, do biological actually work? And today, that conversation has changed a lot. And the main question is how to regulate this better. So I believe we are going to discuss it better, but Brazil is really move fast in talking about this.
So Brazil has become the kind of example for a lot of people, and no doubt. And I want to really congratulate and thank the MAPA and Carlos Goulart and his team and the rest of the industry, because I know that every single stakeholder was engaged in this. So that particular role model, what you have created, is inspiring a lot of countries. Wherever I go, they talk about Brazil model. However, Jose, if I talk from the global perspective, um, do you think if you compare with Brazil and some other agriculture economies where the regulation is moving fast from transformation point of view, what do you think from global perspective? And is EU is a good example or a bad example?
Hi, Roger. Yes, I would say that is a slower example. And I think like many other things in Europe, we see Europe catching up with lots of the, you could call new technologies, but these are not really new technologies. I usually say these are the ones that have been there since ever. I don't think we are in circles. I think we are all going in the same direction at different speeds, right? And Daniela said something really interesting, was this 10 to 15 years ago. And this is a conversation we are still having in some places in Europe, not in all. We have a lot of stakeholders and lots of people pushing on the changes in, legislative changes, also in the facilitating the uptake by the market. But we still hear a lot in Europe of this, do they work, right? And I mean, they work. We know they work. We show that they work. Brazil has been leading the way, but also in other countries. And Europe, we have good examples. But I think in the process of legislation, we are still really, we are behind. There's new opportunities with Omnibus, which I think are really important. And I want to stress that it's important that we have a simplification procedure before we start thinking about the new legislation. Because we have seen this in Brazil, how long it takes. In Europe, we need to multiply by 2 at least, right? So if we enter a new legislative process, we need at least 10 years, and I think we don't have that time because we will be behind, 20 or 25. So, yeah, my wish is really that we catch up now, and we have seen good signs, go in the same direction. It's slower to move things in Europe, and I wanted to reiterate a sense of urgency. I have done that within IBMA and, with our stakeholders, that we cannot wait because we have seen a lot of things in other areas where Europe has been losing traction, right, in adoption. And I think we have a chance here that we still can jump, and get traction on biologicals.
So we always talk about one particular thing, which I'm going to bring up again and again at every forum or stage, that should biologicals or bioagri inputs get their own identity, or they should be clubbed with our existing conventional group of products. I really want to hear from both of you. I know that Brazil in particular has given a very good example. It's clearly law of bio inputs. They have clubbed in every single bio input in that law, including animal husbandry and everything else. However, in every other country, you can see they are totally a different classification. From that point of view, Jose, what do you think? Should it be with its own identity, or should we classify this in a particular existing category?
That's a very good one. Yeah, actually, I think part of the issues we have been having in Europe is this, when we talk about alternatives and then, being coupled with the plant protection product and the pesticides and coming from a chemical background. And, the legislation didn't help because create these candidates of substitution, the idea of the alternative and filling the gaps. And I think that's really wrong because you need to look at it from a system approach and say, actually, you should not be using any, you should use nothing in agriculture in the system imbalance. But we all know that we disrupt ecosystems, right? When we produce food, how do you do it with a less intervention and starting from all the measures, the physical ones, then going on, soil health, and this is getting traction. And that's where the biologicals also play a role, right? And then at the end, you may need to, at the end of the process, to use the chemical substance to control, right? And that's we need to move into that new way of looking at it. And in that sense, yes, I agree that we need to look at this as a different category on their own, and not within the same way we have been looking at, oh, you have a problem, now you have to spray, right? We need to look from a prevention and try to rebalance the system that you are, growing food. We need to grow food. We know that we disrupt it in that sense, but then looking from varieties, right? It's not just talking about biological inputs. It's looking at what varieties, how you do crop rotation, so all the other measures. And then biologicals play a role and should be a category on its own. But there needs to be this change of, we need to apply a product, we need to correct, right? We need to just looking at how we get to the crop cycle, looking at sustainability in terms of environmental, crop production, human health, and the farmer livelihood. And I think we should not forget that piece that, we need to look at economical sustainability of the system as well. That sometimes we forget.
I really, really appreciate you being so candid, because some of that may not directly fit with some of the forums you sit in, but your approach is absolutely right that it should be considered. And you and I have said this from different places. I particularly feel that, if I can share that as my own opinion, that we should stop using the word alternative to chemicals. I think it's a very clearly a different technology, a different product category. And, if you want apple, you take apple. If you want pear, you take pear. Don't say that apple is going to replace the pear, sorry to say. So that's where I think we make a little bit of counterproductive approach towards the biologicals. Daniela, Brazil has taken a different approach than what I just said. I think for you, biologicals are becoming mainstream already, and people are not taking this as alternative to chemicals, but as a product which is going to help them in sustainable agriculture. Am I right?
Yes, and I think it's important to mention that Brazil didn't become a leader because it had less regulation. It became a leader because it worked better on the regulation, and I think it's very important distinction about this, because although we have the new law for bioinputs that really shows a different way to look for the biological products, for now we still waiting for the regulations. So what I mean, we continue to work under the category already existing. But I believe that what Brazil didn't different is don't see the biological as an alternative for the chemical, because this phrase like mentions that the biological exists only because of the chemicals, and it's not true. So I really believe that Brazil looked in a different way, because we know that most countries build their regulation based on the chemical, and now they are trying to adapt the chemical regulation to the biological. Even we have a complete different products. So Brazil started to look for the biological products as not as alternative, but as a solution together. And for me, this do the complete different.
Fantastic. Jose, in that regard, I know your candidness. If you have to say the same thing about Europe, how far behind Europe is in this approach what Daniela is talking about Brazil? Or you think that at every stage you go to, every meeting you go to, the discussion is more about, the chemicals are phasing out, we need to find some alternatives. Am I right or too provocative?
Yeah, I think we still have that. Yeah, I think, you are too provocative as always. Then, but it's a good question. I think we still have that in the room, but I think we have been moving from that approach, Roger. And I think in Europe, mean, with a lot of the people I've been talking to, there's an understanding that we need to move on, to put it on the category on its own and to look at it from a different perspective. And also the understanding that, there's new challenges, there's new pests coming, there's a lot of issues coming, right? And we need something there that it's able to tackle it. And there's resistance building. And I wanted to touch on that point because I think the big difference we have seen, and maybe lots of people don't know the historical of Brazil moving into this fast move on biologicals, is as resistances were building on chemistry, and then there was in certain situations nothing else that could resolve biologicals, and that's from where the adoption came, right? It came from the field because there were resistance that biologicals could tackle. And we are going to go in the same in Europe as we build resistance, right? And I think we have a way to avoid getting into that situation if we have enough biological products on the market that allow us to also manage what is currently being used. And I think that's an important point that now particular biologists they see, agronomists they see, and the agronomists in the agencies they see. I think it's getting through the procedurals at the moment in Europe. That's the issue. It's nothing to do with the safety standards. It's nothing with the assessment itself. It's all the procedures that we are having in place for the chemistry that we built over 20 years and dealing with a system that is more than 20 years old, right? And it's not fit. It's just not fit for some of these technologies we are seeing in Brazil. If you look at I call it the fourth generation of biologicals coming in Brazil, right? Mixture of the metabolites with products and viable organisms and adding extracts. So they are doing a lot of innovation at the product level. And if you look at this in Europe, we are still with more of the same things we have been using for many years. So the proven technologies, because that's the one that can fly through the system if you wanna, right? So I think that's an issue we need to address. The way the system is working today, not looking at product level. And until we do that change, look at the product level, look at the efficacy and start from there, from the field, and build the assessment rather than starting from the assessment and then you see what you have at the very end. So it's, I think we need to look at it from the product level. Look at product, what is the product efficacy field, and then you just build it. What are the questions we need to do to make sure the product is safe for the consumers, for the environment, etc. But we start from the other end of the process, right? We start doing questions, but not starting from the product and what the product is actually doing. And I think that needs to change.
No, this is fantastic what you just said, because if I can add 2 steps in the back of it, because what you just said, that's an absolute no-brainer. I hope policymakers and industry stakeholders, they understand it. The 2 things which I am just grasping from both of you, one is that I think your point from Daniela's point that in Brazil, the biologicals became one of the mainstream solution technologies because there was a need and there was a demand from the market. Of course, it was because of the resistance or because of the sustainable approach they wanted to take towards the soil and also from the residue management. I would say it's no different to Europe. The only thing is, in addition to that, in Europe, you have another driver that a lot of chemicals are being phased out. Therefore, you need something to come and give more solutions. So again, not an alternative, but we should have more solutions. For example, again, I use examples. Tesla came, right? Tesla, it was all electric car Tesla. But finally, it's not only Tesla, right? This technology of the electric car is now a mainstream, correct? But it started with Tesla. So it's not an alternative. It's something more sustainable car available in the marketplace, and it's improving every day. Both of you, how do you see that the mindset, especially of some of the stakeholders in EU and some other countries, is going to change and understand this, what I just said? Jose.
Yeah,
Europe is,
talking a little.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
Daniela. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Daniela, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Looking for Brazil, as other countries for a long time, the demand came mainly from regulators, and sustainable initiatives. And today, farmers are become one of the biggest drivers. But I think it's important to say that the question is not how can I be sustainable or how can I be greener or friendly. This is not the main question of the growers. They are asking, how do I manage resistance? How do I deal with the climate variability, with resistant issues? How do I improve profitability? And then the sustainability is like a consequence. Of course, it's important, but it's not the main drive here. And I think and the biological are part of the answer to have this solution. This is the way that I view this situation. It's not because only because they are sustainable, but because they give farmers another set of tools to manage the complex production system that we have here in Brazil.
Jose?
No, I agree. I think it's about the farmers getting, the hands in the products and then using them. And that's what we're lacking in Europe. And I think a big mistake Europe has done on the transition from the old directive to the regulation was removing a figure called provisional authorization. That provisional authorization of the products was crucial for some products being starting uses by the farmers, right? And most of the biologicals we have today on the market were coming from that figure, where growers were starting using them, right? And then they will go through the registration. Today, we start on the active ingredient level. We are the only ones doing this in the world, by the way. And Europeans, we think, is very logical. So we start that whole process, and then 10 years down the road, there's a product for being used at the farmer. Of course, in that 10 years, the world evolved, right? And, formulation changed, the emergency change of the use of the product, the crop systems probably, there's an evolution. And I think that's where we need to look at this seriously, saying, okay, the whole system we have in place is not suitable for these products. And one interesting point that you mentioned, the sustainability. Europe has been driving the speech on policies in sustainability, right? And then we didn't have the enablers to make it deliver on that sustainability on agriculture. I found that quite interesting. But it's not just agriculture, it's a lot of other areas. And if you look at things, you can look at the car industry, right? It's also, we were very much into that drive, and then, Tesla came and disrupts. And I usually use the car industry to give an example here. If you wanted to reduce the number of cars, moving it to electric is also not a solution, right? We need to have some conversation about mobility. Let's talk about mobility of people going, to their jobs. Who needs a car? How many cars we need? Because, okay, we move from petrol, from electricity, but we still have the parking issue. We still have the tires. You still have, a contribution to the footprint. And I think it's the same in agriculture. It is not replacement. It's not, substitution. It's just saying, okay, let's look at what we need in this crop system to deliver on the grower, to manage resistance, right? To do the lowest impact we can in terms of the environmental footprinting, that we can leave something to the next generation that is at least as good as what we got. So it's more of this kind of contract that we do as I'll say as a species, right? To say what can we make now to support ourselves and the planet, but then we are delivering something to the next generation that it's not too much compromise, right? And I think that is missing this, it's missing at the execution level, if you want to. I think everybody has good ideas and wanted to do these policies, but then we need to do it in our daily lives, right? And I think that's what it's still missing a bit in Europe, is thinking, okay, it's not possible, but what can I do actually to make it possible? It's this enabling that we are still missing, I think. That's my opinion.
But I like this little bit of difference of opinion in a way, because I fully understand what the Brazilian farmers are driven with, and everyone knows that EU, one of the drivers for them is also the environment, the sustainability. And I would say personally, and you can totally challenge me, that is neither nor. I think it's both. I think finally we do have to think about the next generation. We cannot deny that our practices are not sustainable for the future. And I will give you some. You said about walking the talk, and I like to use practical example. You go to these grocery stores in Europe, and they say no plastic, and they will charge you $1 for the bag. Uh, and then you go inside the store, it's plastic all over the place. So again, the point is that are we going to repeat the same thing in the biological or our agriculture industry, that we say something and do something else, and the regulation comes and does something totally different? And why I am again provoking, because Europe is 26, 27 state countries, part of EU. So it's never easy. This is why I'm asking that every single country in Europe is not thinking about sustainability or finding a product which will give them a technological solution beyond synthetic chemicals. How are you seeing that, Jose? And then I will ask Daniela, how did you manage that transition in Brazil? So Jose, from your point of view, because you have a very complex situation.
Yes, I wish I have an answer for you on that, how to resolve. I mean, at that level, I think there's in my head, a big discussion when we had the European level to the country level, but still kept all the country level kind of legislation and requirements. We just create new layers. And for the biologicals, I really question if we need all these layers. You know, you have a zonal level and you have EU level, and then you have the country still level for the pesticides. I mean, I really challenge, do you actually need this? Or just do one single layer, whatever that layer is. We have seen, for example, the difficulties on the fertilizer product regulation to try to do a EU layer that made a regulation that has been extremely difficult to implement, right? Because there were lots of agreements, and then, you know, in practice, I don't think it's working well, that level. With the pesticides, we have seen the same, or the plant protection products, right? That we have seen all these layers building the zonal, which I also don't understand. So I think it's just to question really, maybe for these particular kind of products, the member states, some can lead the way. Why not? Why not saying, okay, if you want to lead the way, just lead the way, and the others are not going to block it for, I don't know, whatever reason, right? I think maybe that's a discussion we also need to have, to say we wanted the union to be functional, but if there's no residues involved at the end of the process, which are in most of the cases, why do we have to have all these agreements just to have a single area for trading food? I think that's a discussion probably needs to be on the, you know, also on the table. Yeah, if you, it's a way to look at it.
I really love this, and my media team is making notes. And if we were a commercial media, it will be the headlines tomorrow, what you just said. But we are going to make it more consultative. But your point is very valid, Jose. That's what I wanted from this podcast, not just to go into something, you know, in the comfort zone. What you are saying is so crucial that we need to have a dialogue about these layers and the practicality. And every time, and I'm going to say this for a reason, you know that, every time some state or a stakeholder in EU is raising an objection, I will like to ask them, guys, if you're listening to me, do you have a solution to this? Or you are just blocking things and delaying things? If you have a solution, be part of the solution. Don't become the blockade. This is the message to those people who are, for example, slowing down the simplification process in itself, which can be at least short to medium term fix for some of these problems. It doesn't help the layers, but still, it gives us hope that we can go from 5-6 years to 2-3 years, kind of, right, Jose?
Yeah,
with the
I think you need to look
simplification.
at this. I think it's a question of a timeline to give growers access to the products and also give a sign to industry, say this is a place, like Europe is a place you should come and invest in field development. And I usually use this example. We had the best innovation in the world, in innovation, but developing new products, developing new technologies, use this, and also companies. And we had this in the biologicals, and we let it go already, right? We have one or two standing, but we let it go because there was no market access, right? And if you are a small startup in Europe, it's very difficult then to reach to Brazil, where you have also, players in the market, or to the US, where they also have players in the market. So I think that's an important point as well. As a citizen, worries me a bit, to say, okay, we had lots of this innovation, we had great universities, great researchers, also people with, business capabilities, but then they cannot wait 10 years or more, because then you have 10 years to registration, but then you have, sales, commercialization. So all these questions, you cannot support this innovation, and then some got busted, some got bought, some got disappeared. So I think it's important that we look at this as well, to say it's the timeline that it's actually derailing this, and this is caused by whatever things, lots of questions or the system or the things, but we need to find, and I think the omnibus doesn't solve all the problems. Let me be clear, it's not solving all the problems we have today, but it's just helping, and also showing that, let's have a conversation and do something differently. Because I think that's the point you are making, sometimes not offering an alternative and not offering it's not possible, but what can be done, right? And I think that's what Omnibus shows, is saying, okay, Europe gives a sign, actually, that we are able to change, right? We are willing to actually go on the path and have that conversation. And I think that's an important piece where I see this, and then it's going to take some time. I agree, it's going to take some time. And I often hear people say it's not going to solve this and this. It's not a solution for all the problems, it's a step. And then eventually one day we need a new regulation that's clear, like Brazil. So we need to get there, but we need also to do that path. And I'm going to give you a good example now, interesting enough. Brazil is discussing a lot around IP on this the natural substance. And we need to have that conversation, but it's still not coming, because we are still not there, right? We are still not there on that particular point where we need to have that conversation, which Brazil now is having, right? How they grant some rights on, protection data, or the mechanism needs to be different from the chemistry. But we need some time to get to that stage. And I think I took a lot of time. Sorry, Daniela. I think
no, it's a very important distinction you just made, and Daniela can vouch for it. We are in different stages in Brazil and EU and some of the countries. I think although Brazil has not executed the new regulation yet, for obvious reasons, it will come most likely in 6 months or 1 year. So my question to Daniela is on two fronts. One is, law of bioinputs has been there for a long time now, almost 1.5 years. When are we expecting the regulation coming out as so people can start using it? When are you expecting? And second thing is, a lot of people ask me this, what are you doing in this limbo phase? It's a limbo phase.
Yeah,
People are, because we have been talking about your new regulation, but in reality, you are still in the old regulation.
Yeah. In fact, it's true. We are still following the old legislation. So when it's a biopesticide, it's under the pesticides law, and we have also biostimulant that here in Brazil is biofertilizer, or inoculant. So we are still working on this way. But of course, we expect to have some changes, and not to be less restricted, but to be in accordance with the type of product that we are working on, and don't have the same rules as a chemical pesticides. But being so frank, we don't expect a lot of changes in the requirements for the registration because, as I mentioned, Brazil already had this specific legislation more than 20 years. And the macrobiological legislation, for example, is quite new, is so modern already. So, of course, we expect to have a few changes, but also Ministry of Agriculture is guaranteeing a good transition phase when the law become really enforced to don't bring any impact to the sector. And just taking the opportunity, I think it's important to say that one thing that Brazil really do, besides the legislation, it's to work on the regulatory system. So each authority, because as you may know, we have 3 different agencies involved, and each agency created a specific team to evaluate the biological products and also separate the queues, the application queues to having the approval faster. And more important, provide training for this team from the authorities to stop to look to the dossiers with the chemical mindset and to do a lot of unnecessary requirements. So besides the legislation, there are other topics to think and to look and to improve, talking about the regulatory agencies.
This is, if I can summarize this for the audience, this is something very important you mentioned. So if I go in the bullet points, number 1 for the audience, that if you're thinking that the new regulation is already in place and that is the reason for all the transformation in Brazil, that is not true. That is not even executed yet. So what does it mean is the second point. That means the 3 agencies or the government in Brazil, it was already very understanding of the needs of the farmers for last 8 to 10 years, and their regulation and how they stop the barriers for the innovation so that the farmers can have solution and new technology. That has been going on for some time, right? That's something what people have to understand. So it's not that the transformation will happen after the regulation comes in, the new regulation. The mindset, what all of us should learn globally, was already very positive towards the farmers' needs. And I will keep saying farmer centricity because that's exactly what it was. And on that note, Jose, because you are dealing with the regulation globally, you have been in different positions and now with the IBMA as well. First, I will quote myself. When I say global harmonization, I want to clarify, I do not mean that every country should have the same regulation. That's not what I say with the harmonization. When I say harmonization is learning from the best practices and trying to avoid same pitfalls what others have already. Don't reinvent and reinvest in something which others have already successfully done or somehow navigated. So Jose, what do you think about the global harmonization from this definition point of view? Where are we today?
I think if we look at in terms of the data, I don't think we have a big problem, and OECD has been doing a great job there, and also with the members of OECD. I think it's accepted today. There's things to be done clearly, right? There's some guidelines to be adopted, but I don't think in terms of data there's a lot of repetition going on. This is my opinion. If you come with some studies to European regulators, in some data generated in Brazil or the US that was used, they are accepted. I mean, there's questions still, but particular microorganisms is the one I know the best. So I don't think there's a big blockage in terms of the data itself. What we see, it's then an additional question coming in particular technologies in certain parts of the world. And as you mentioned, the regulatory system and the mindset. And this, I think what Brazil changed was they cut the assessment time, right? So in terms of developing something that the growers need, there was a cut to 1.5 and 2 years, right? There's a problem in the showing up or a new pest or whatever the problem is, right? And then you will have a solution within 2 years. And I think that's a big difference from what we are dealing with in other parts of the world with this lengthy timeline. So we need to look at it and say, how do we actually address that timeline? The requirements, I don't think it's a problem. Okay, if you look particularities, plant extracts or natural derived materials in Europe, it's a problem. They are seen as chemicals. There's too many questions that should not be asked on the agencies, but I don't think you need to do that by legislative change, right? You just need a better knowledge and say some questions. Obviously, if the efficacy, if a product needs to be applied every 5 days, it's because it's not persisting. That's usually my argument, right? But if it's not, that's the problem we are having today still with biologicals, is they degrade too fast. So having things about persistency or, even chronic effects, a lot of these questions we try to answer. I think that's the main issue I see today. I don't think data is a problem. I think it's just all the barriers we are seeing in some places because of outdated systems to assess, right? Or submission process or some requirements, or even people. We forgot also people, right? It's difficult for people to operate a change. I've been 20 years doing that thing. It's very difficult now to change without having some support, some coaching. It's not. It's also about a lot about it is about the people to say we need some change. We need maybe new people to look at this. We need maybe separated teams to look at this, and try to find ways to assess this differently.
So,
can I just do a
sure,
comment
absolutely.
about? Yeah, because I completely agree with José's comments, but I maybe we can also think about to having how can I explain to share the same scientific assessment. For example, when we talk about Brazil, for example, when we talk about new active ingredients, if this active ingredient it's already registered in Europe or in US, the Brazilian authorities will consider their evaluation. And of course, I'm not saying it doesn't mean automatically accepting to another country decision, but it's recognize a high quality scientific assessment and starting from this point and not from the zero. So if we could create this relationship of confidence and to work with similar risk assessment evaluation between the countries, we could have this new technology and new products faster.
Daniela, you really made my day because I had this experience last week. I was talking to someone about a product and they said exactly the same thing, that, hey, if you have data from any other country, in Brazil, we don't take that much time unless it is totally different than what we need. We try to make it work. And that was really a breath of fresh air, and that I don't think will fly in every other country. So this one is really important, the assessment time and the data. I also meant a little bit about learning from each other from the point of view of definitions, the categories, of course, data and time to assessment, and then what kind of mutual recognition we can do. This is what I meant by the harmonization. If we can come to some consensus, that will be awesome. And that may be a good segue, Jose, for first of all, I want to invite the audience and everyone who will also listen to the recorded one. In October 22nd and 23rd, we have IBMA's AVIM. If you are not registered, you should register immediately. This is one of the platforms where most of the industry comes together. All the serious players will be there, and we can continue this dialogue there. And then, Jose, I think one of the purposes of the regulatory forum of the Global BioAg Alliance can be what we are discussing at the moment, is a little bit of some initiatives on creating some kind of a baseline or a white paper where people can see that what the other countries are doing, what are the things which can make farmers' life better with good ROIs, will facilitate speed of innovation. I don't want to take too much time, but Jose said something very important that was really alarming, that by the time this innovation can get to the farmer in some countries, I don't want to keep repeating EU, but by that time the innovation is already obsolete. It's gone, so that can also be detrimental for the startups and the scale-ups and innovators. So that's also we should keep in mind, is that it's a loop which we cannot get going. So Jose, what do you think, what do you want to achieve from the regulatory forum? What are your next steps?
I think it's just to open really this dialogue. When we talk about having some podcasts and we are doing our first attempt today. I think it's to open this conversation and get some ideas. And you see a great one from Daniela saying, well, in Brazil, and Brazil accepts assessments from other countries, right? But now we have a problem because Brazil is the one where the actives are being registered first. So, right, it's like, oh yeah, all the submissions are going, but Brazil is actually the first. So they need a bit more time. But then are there other countries or jurisdictions recognizing that authorization? So that's a nice question. I didn't place myself. And now I think it's a good question saying, well, are now the European agencies looking at the Brazil assessments now? And another one, I think it's very important to look at this with the delays that I keep stressing on this timeline because, I'm a citizen of the world, but I'm an European at heart. And then it's like, I really like, where I live, I like the continent and I want to fight for it. And I think in that point, it's when I look at countries that used to look at Europe for a reference, if you go on the neighboring countries, right, you used to need an authorization in Europe, but now, they are shifting away because they say, well, yeah, it's not registered in Europe, this biocontrol, but I'm still gonna, go for it and get me an authorization elsewhere. Right, because of trade issues. And I think that's where Europe needs to look at it, with more attention to say you are losing a bit on referencing now to regulate. And I think this forum is a bit about it, is like to exchange and try to gain some traction in operating certain change and the line, because then we are all trading and we need to make it, kind of fair in terms of trade as well.
That's really a good take home for the regulatory forum also, that how do we create a little bit of a global space of dialogue, if I can put in few words. So when we talk about the global space, because of the time, my team has been sending that we have 3 minutes so we can open some questions from the audience as well for 10 minutes. So I have one last kind of comment and question at the same time. Of course, the regulatory forum of the Global BioAg Alliance is basically connecting the dots. So for example, if SABO is doing something in Africa, South Africa, and then Brazilian industry and the associations are doing few things there, then US and Europe, basically in the leadership of Jose, the regulatory forum is connecting the dots and putting everything in one, and then see how we can come to something where we can say, okay, these are the points we should consider if we are redefining regulation or redefining the product categories or anything, so they are not starting from scratch. From that point of view, although Carl already announced that in Valencia, I think it may be a good idea that we continue this dialogue twice a year, at least in person, once at ABIM in October, and then in first week of June with the BAW Congress, where regulatory session has become one of the key points for discussion. Jose, what is your dream run on this? How do you want to, what is your marching order for the Secretariat of the GBA for a regulatory forum?
I think we need this space of dialogue first. That's where we talk. Last year was saying, okay, let's start a podcast. Let's see. I mean, we have a few time for the audience, which I would like to get there. But having this space also for discussion with the audience, and then come up towards the end with some kind of a white paper and identifying some things that we actually can all work towards them. And we see that it's nothing about standards. It's not really the requirements that Daniela, she mentioned. I share. I'm sure lots of my peers in Europe will share that it's not the requirements. It's just other things that we need to actually operate differently. And maybe they are a lot on the mindset, on people, right? And then let's identify it and let's not keep blaming the regulation, right? I feel sometimes we are blaming, the regulation itself, but it's maybe, okay, can we do something different? Can we avoid a question that is going to delay the whole process, right? Why do I need to ask that question? It's a scientific question. Is it a regulatory question, really? And will that question increase safety or efficacy of the product? And that's, I will challenge as well that balance to say, let's try to figure out what are the right questions for the right technology.
I have one thing,
just
Daniela.
to finish one thing on the trade, on the GBA. So I think the forum is interesting because it's not just about the trade, the industry, right? We have some agencies or some people contributing as well. And also, you have biostimulants, but you have a lot of the space and it's not segmented to a region and, just to a type of technology. And I'll finish with that.
No, that's a very good point. Basically, that's exactly what it is a global meeting point where we are not divided by boundaries or divided by different decorum of different associations, their mandates. It's like a melting pot where we can bring everything together. So Daniela and Jose, that technology is evolving a lot. We are talking a lot about the AI and all these things. And this is a very important question for the audience to know. Those dossiers, hours and hours of reading and preparing those dossiers. With AI and the new innovation technologies coming, how do you think it is going to help the regulatory landscape? This is very important. Or are you seeing any signs where AI or some of these tools are already impacting and making life easier for the regulatory consultant? Daniela.
Yeah. From the regulatory aspect, we are not seeing the AI by now, but for sure it will come very, very fast. And together with the AI, the microbial, the genomics, the precision agriculture, and digital precision support, and I think the most important thing, they are starting to converge between them. And I think it's important, and the real innovation is not coming from any one technology anymore. It's coming from how these technologies work together. I think this is the main point, and how to use everything together. And I think it is, and also I think it's important to have like adaptive regulation. To have the possibility to considering all these new technologies under the current legislation, and to avoid the same pathway that we are in front now, that we don't have in the legislation a clear legislation, so we stop the process. So I think Brazil already work on that way to try to have some points in the legislation that open a window to consider new technologies that it's not clear mentioned in our legislation. Here in Brazil, we have a good example nowadays. It's about RNIA. We don't have a specific legislation for that, but the Brazilian authorities are open to discuss this and to build this pathway together with the industry. And very soon we are going to have our first approval here in Brazil, even without having a specific legislation for that.
Fantastic. Jose, we talk about EU a lot. I'm sure that a lot of you are burning today in EU. You talked about data and the assessment time. Don't you think that these new technologies can help your regulators to fast forward some of these processes where it takes them months and years to do the data assessment?
Yeah, so I saw really at the regulator level, because they get all the dossiers, and if they are all in the same place, you do have a big opportunity, right? Because you can screen across if all the data will be centralized, which I don't think is the case in Europe because there's different agencies, the data is in different places. So I think that's going to be a challenge for the regulator. But yes, you could speed up the assessments because if you have all the things in the same place, and I think there's a massive opportunity there. Clearly, I also see one great one is when you start to simulate programs, because that's the way to go, right? We should not be talking at the product level. We still have that authorization at the product level, but looking at programs, and with all the data we have today, I'm sure you can even put a plan to simulate a program for
Exactly.
sugar beet, for potato, for a certain country under the certain conditions or a certain growing situation. Say, what could we be using as a program to tackle rhizotonia, or whatever you want to put. I think that's a great way to start using or thinking about using the AI.
Fantastic. I think that was really a very important kind of conclusion because that also goes to our discussion we had last week that how it looks like in 5 years, right? I personally feel, and you can challenge me, correct me, that you will see a huge transformation because of, I'm not saying it will cut the corners. Don't get me wrong. We never have to cut the corners. That's one thing we have to understand. Otherwise, all the snake oil companies will come and flood the market, and the scientific innovations will not be will have a difficult time to prove their worth. So we do want regulation. Our regulators are not villains. It's our system, and our stakeholders have to come together to facilitate and make their life easier as well. And I'm sure the new technologies will make their life easier as well. Don't you think, both of you, before I open it for questions?
Definitely.
Daniela is already practicing it, so she doesn't have to say definitely. Because
And I think it's still I think there's on the chat a comment saying that EBA is actually using some of the tools already on the assessment. And yes, I think we should not drive against it. We just need to find sensible ways to adopt it to our daily lives.
Absolutely, and I think I have heard a lot of regulatory consultants are also using these tools to prepare dossiers faster and all that. I think there's a positive sign, and I personally feel, and it's for the record, the regulatory landscape globally will look very different in 3 to 5 years' time. Jose's team at the GBA and the Secretariat and the ambassadors like Daniela, we will keep doing our best to bring everyone together so that we are not wasting and in reinventing and reinvesting. On that note, Secretariat team, are there any questions before I ask my friend KRK to give little update on the Indian regulation, which is like snake and ladder, right, KRK? It goes forward and backwards. KRK,
Hi.
are you there? Hi.
Yes, I'm there.
So tell us a little bit about the Indian regulation. How is it now? We have something firm which we can say we have a solution, or you think it will be another 2 steps backwards and 1 step forward?
See, the regulation you are asking about, we have now 3 verticals under biologicals:
Yeah, please. Can you give?
biopesticides, biofertilizers, and biostimulants.
Yes.
So, biostimulants, more or less, it is streamlined. Still, we have some confusions around many formulations. Maybe government in future they may consolidate. So, because today we have 100 plus biostimulants registered, they are under regulatory framework, and maybe out of that, around 30 seaweed extracts, ranging from 2% to 25%, something like that. like amino acids, a combination of fulvic acid, amino acid, vitamins, enzymes. So all bunch of biostimulants are now approved in the country. So it's, I don't know, because it's my perspective, my personal perspective, that it will create confusion to the farmers, definitely.
So the reason
Because
yeah,
yeah,
the reason I
because
brought you, KRK, the reason I brought you because for Jose, as a chair, and you are the co-chair of the forum, I wanted to make sure that we plan our next podcast uh, on India because it's of the moving targets and a little bit of confusion I hear from the market. That's why I wanted you to give a 1 minute snapshot before we go into the questions. So you are confirming what I was thinking.
of course. So see now it's open across the world that Indian biostimulants category approved, though 4 or 5 years back. It took long time for the government to bring in certain guidelines. It's a good thing. This is a really positive step, and but at the same time, so many formulations of a single extract base, like seaweed extracts, maybe sargassum, kappa ficus, or maybe whatsoever. Likewise, amino acids, mostly plant origin, now approved, animal origin, now they have actually withdrawn recently. So there is something is going on around. Even the government also trying to get more clarity on the status of biostimulant because it is flanked in between biofertilizers and biopesticides. So therefore, it is difficult to draw a straight line between these. So government
So
is struggling, and industry is also, of course, enlightening the government various industry issues and problems, and we're taking them to the ministry. It's happening, but nevertheless, the act is in place, and everyone is now ready for this season. The big or small or multinationals or Indian companies. So everyone is waiting for a good monsoon.
fantastic. No, I think the monsoon is picking up now. I hear that the deficit is now only 23%. I keep track of all these things. So, Jose, the reason I introduced KRK because this is where I think KRK and Vipin together can be part of the next podcast, which we can do on the Indian subcontinent, especially India, because there are a lot of moving parts and is becoming the next hub for our biological. So thank you so much, KRK, for coming in the spotlight as always. Any questions, guys, from the Secretariat team? So, hello, any questions, guys? No questions. So thank you so much,
I think
both of you.
there's a quick one maybe for Daniela on the chat. An international BioAg startup developing a new product to Brazil. What prioritized from day one?
Oh,
I don't know
there
if you
is
can see
one.
the chat, Daniela.
Yeah, absolutely. There is one.
Yes. And there's one on efficacy. I could try. There's one if efficacy data has been accepted in Brazil from other places.
Yeah, there are quite a few questions. I think the team missed it.
Fine.
So, Daniela, maybe Jose, you can read it for her.
Yeah, I agree. So Sharon said that she agrees with Daniela that the breakthrough will be a global acceptance of rigorous dossiers. It will be equally important to accept efficacy data from other countries. Is there a precedent for Brazil to accept data from other countries and if EU as well?
Yeah. In fact, no. In fact, when we talk about efficacy data, I believe this is the one data that the countries will request to be performed locally. So no, we can use all the other data, the laboratory study, toxicological, ecotox data, but the efficacy trials always must be performed locally. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the second one is, as an international BioAg startup developing biological crop protection products and planning to enter Brazilian market, what should we prioritize from day one? R&D, regulatory strategy, manufacturing readiness, IP protection, to avoid costly delays, accelerate market access, and build a dossier that is both compliant and attractive to investors. Wow, that's a big question, Nish. It's a big one. So what you should prioritize, I think. Yeah.
I'm tempted to say all of them, but Daniela, you can ask. But the truth is, all these points are really something they are connected to each other. But Daniela, question is for you.
Yeah, but in fact, we should consider everything. But it's quite important to look for the product, for the composition, for the mode of action, for the claim to have the right category, and then to understand the right requirements, and then having a good regulatory strategy to save timing, to save money, and to generate the right data since the beginning.
And maybe a last one, what is the registration timeline for biofertilizers and biopesticides in Brazil? If you can give just one. And then I think we can close.
Yes, when we talk about biopesticides nowadays, after the submission, it takes around 12 to 18 months to get the approval after the submission. When we talk about biofertilizer, when it's a biofertilizer classifying to category already existing in our legislation, it's about 3 to 6 months. But it's a new one that it's necessary to perform field trials here and to have a deeper evaluation. And then in this case, could take 6 to 12 months to get the approval. But the good news that we have, because we had a change in the legislation of fertilizer also, and we don't have the temporary registration anymore. Now we get the registration, and the registration is valid like forever. We don't have this reevaluation anymore, so it was a very good news in the last few months.
What about biopesticides? Anything for biopesticide timeline, Daniela?
Yeah, the timeline after the submission, it's 12 to 18 months. And we usually, to generate the data, it's about 8 months. Of course, depends on the field trials and the crop. But usually in total, 2.5 years is enough to start to generate data and get the registration approval.
So that is, in some cases, is the worst case scenario. In most countries is your best case scenario. So that
yeah.
So thank you so much, both of you. I just want to, first of all, this was very candid, and especially from the EU point of view, Jose, for sharing your point of view so openly, candidly. And that's exactly the purpose of the Global BioAg Alliance and the Regulatory Forum. Of course, just to give everyone the update based on the feedback from last year's, we have now moved the BioAg World Congress, which happens only once a year. Now it's happening in the first week of June, the 1st to 4th of June. 1st and 2nd of the June is our pre-event activities. We are doing some summits, workshops, and GBA conclave. And then 2 days is our Congress, as always, which is the 3rd and the 4th. Don't forget that Campinas is not so complex to reach. A lot of people are asking me this question, which shows to me there's a lot of interest. Campinas, to be honest, you can drive faster than going to Sao Paulo city in most of the time from the airport. However, we are planning to organize some logistics for people, and people who want to go to Rio and other beaches. There is also a local airport which they can fly from to Rio, just 1 hour flight, and very cheap. So just wanted to give that update. Keep an eye on that. And thank you so much again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.